Everyone, Adam here, So Wizard Podcast. Got a really cool interview for you today. I got to sit down with actor Bill Oberst. If you don't know this guy's name, you should. Look at his IMDb. He's done a ton of work, a ton of really cool things. He's a hard worker, but even cooler, as I discovered in this conversation, he's also a really deep thinker. We had a really awesome hour-long talk that was just all over the place, but in the best way. You know, we just kind of jump topic to topic. We did, of course, talk about Bill's career. We talked about his new movie out, Painkiller, which is a cool revenge story. And he was just a fascinating, highly intelligent person to talk to, and the kind of person that when you talk to him, you want to learn more and you want to do better conversationally. So it was really inspiring, a ton of fun. I hope that comes through to you, the audience, as you watch it. So enjoy. Hey everybody, Adam here, So Wizard Podcast. I'm sitting down with Bill Oberst Jr., whose latest movie, Painkiller, is available now. How you doing, Bill?
I'm doing great, Adam. How are you?
I'm doing good. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on.
Thank you for having me, man. I want to ask about the origin of your. I'm always interested in names, when people name their pod. Like, where did So Wizard come from?
I'm pretty sure it was, because I do it with some other people. I'm actually kind of like the late addition to the team. The main guy who started it, Joey, it's a line from Star Wars Episode 1, and I think he picked it because it was a cheesy line.
What's the line?
He described something as so wizard, as saying it's so cool. I have no idea why they never use it again, but that's it's the young Anakin.
Is it a phrase that people use in, like, does it exist in life? Does anybody say, like,
I don't think so. I think he just thought it was a really weird, bizarre, random thing to have thrown into the movie that's never referenced again, and I've never heard it anywhere else.
I'm going to start using it.
There you go.
Because, like, when you're perceived as weird, it's okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to start saying with a straight face, so wizard.
Yeah, instead of it being so cool, it's so awesome. It's so wizard.
It's so wizard. Because I really hate awesome. Awesome. I would just like to flush awesome away forever. It's not awesome. The fact that you got a new cell phone is not awesome. My tie is not awesome. Awesome means it inspires awe. Yeah.
It's like legendary was overused so much like the last 3 years that forget it.
How would you like, as a person, if somebody called you like the legendary Adam? Because they do that sometimes to actors. And you're like, when I think of a legend, I'm thinking of like a griffin, like a lion with wings.
Okay, yeah. I could see a legend as a real person, but like, I don't know, like Julius Caesar, like, someone like who changed the course of the world.
But not while he's alive.
No, way after. Because I'm sure at the time obviously people hated him. The guy got stabbed 100 times, but.
Yeah. So good. We've covered mythology, history, and culture already.
I know. We're off to a really strong start just 2 minutes in.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Sorry. Now I'm a little thrown. I don't want it to feel like such a structured thing now.
I hate structure, really. I mean, you have to have it.
Yeah.
Like on a film, it's a military operation, really. But then once you get into the scene, the more organic it is, the better. You just let it flow. And if you mess up, you can do it again. But that's where the good stuff happens, is unstructured.
I agree. And even with these, it's not nearly as in-depth as a film, obviously. We're just, having a conversation. But that's how I like it to feel, is more we're hanging out, having a conversation where I do have some idea of a path I'd like to follow. I'm not having you waste your time just so we can, stare at each other over webcam. But I don't like to just have 10 questions and I grill you and then we move on. It's not interesting.
It's not at all. In fact, like the whole idea of an interview, I think is of limited interest, but a conversation is pretty.
Yeah. Yeah, I call them interviews because that just seems to be the kind of industry term, but really we're having a conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I've actually started using that, like when your publicist reaches out, I'd love to sit down and have a conversation. Or I'd love to sit down and talk to Bill, not like, yes, I'd like to interview him. I have my boilerplate 12 questions. I'm going to hit him with the same that I do everybody, because it's just too clinical.
Thank you. I like the fact that you used the word clinical. That's a very precise term. It implies sterility and removal and detachment Yeah, it is. It is clinical.
Thank you. Yeah. That being said, I'm going to kind of contradict myself because I do like asking creative people to go back to their creative journey. And
Uh-huh.
while it's a question I always lean on, I think it's okay because the answers are always different.
Yes.
So you are a very, very busy actor. You're in a ton of things.
Couple of them are good. Couple.
When did you know you wanted to be an actor?
All my life, came out of the womb. I really do believe that God, if you will, or the universe, if you won't, or destiny, provide us with a vocation, like something inside of us that we can do a little bit better than thousands of other people. And if you can find some way like to work out that vocation in your life and maybe make it close to your occupation, it's a course of real happiness because work is always work. But God, if you love what you're doing, it's so much easier. So I always knew that I wanted to entertain people and to make them happy. And in happy, I include terrified, all the range of emotions. I want to
Right.
entertain people because life is really hard. It's tedious. It's repetitive. And I want to take people out of that. I always have since I was a kid and just make them for a moment say, hey, I forgot my life for a second. That's what I've always wanted.
Yeah, and that's always been the draw of movies is that it's an escape, and especially the last year and a half now is, you needed more than ever to turn off the news and get off the internet and just watch something and be absorbed.
Yeah.
So, was it any particular movie do you remember watching as a kid where you're like, that's the thing I'm going to do, or was it just kind of the performance in general?
It was monsters, Adam. I loved monsters.
Like the Universal monsters?
Yeah, any kind of monsters. Back then, there was sort of a revival of monsters in the late 60s, early 70s. And when I grew up, and there was a magazine called Famous Monsters, another one called Fangoria, Rue Morgue, if you could get it. But these were the magazines that I lived for, every issue. Nothing online, of course. So you go to the drugstore.
Yeah.
The sign says, do not read magazines. And there's the old librarian woman staring at you to make sure you don't read. But if you can, sneak it, flip through, and then you cut grass and save up your money and go buy that issue. There's something about monsters that appealed so much to me. I guess because I felt like one, but I liked them. I sympathized with them, and I sensed that there was something in monsters that was universal to all, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Uh, and so the things that I saw, I was too young to get in, but I got in to see The Exorcist, which blew me away. And then I read in these monster magazines about a silent film star named Lon Chaney. And there was no way then to, no VCR or DVD to see these movies they were talking about. But the Masonic Lodge, one Halloween when I was maybe 12, 13, they advertised that they were showing old silent scary movies is what they called it. It was like on a bed sheet in their Masonic Hall. 16 millimeter, silent, of course, with somebody playing the piano. And so I got my grandmother, begged her to take me to go see, and I saw Nosferatu and Lon Chaney's Phantom of the Opera back to back. And man, I was hooked. Those were the movies that I wanted to make. They were the movies I wanted to be in. There was the life I wanted to live. Those were the monsters I really wanted to be and to experience. So I started going out, sneaking out of my house late at night and climbing the trees and like imagining that I was a creature. I'd try to walk like the Wolfman. Really crazy stuff. So yeah, a weird kid who wanted to be a monster, and any monster movies that I could see, I loved. I had monster models too. I had all the monster models that were available. Got rid of them in college, of course, when I was too cool for them. And oh God, now I wish I had them back.
Yeah, one of those things that you'd give anything to have that in your home office or wherever you'd put them.
So I just decided to get back into it. So I ordered. There was a TV production of Frankenstein with De Niro. Did you ever see it?
I never saw it, but it's one of those things that you hear like, oh, De Niro was in Fragment, and you're like, what?
He's good too. So
Is
anyway,
he?
there's a vinyl model that was out in the early '90s. It's big. I mean, it's like a foot tall, and it's of De Niro, and he's crouched, his full body, and he's crouching like this. And he's got the scars and everything. So I ordered it, put it together, and I got about 5 coats of paint on it now, and I'm just working with it, and I'm really, really enjoying having a monster to paint again.
That's awesome. And do you do the whole airbrush, or is it all hand paints?
I like hand. I learned, I used to do my own prosthetics when I was doing stage work. I did Mark Twain and had latex pieces. And in film, even I like, if I can, to have some part in my own prosthetics that I'm, if they'll let me help design or
Yeah.
something. So there's a flicking technique where you take a chip brush and flick around, and you go around in rounds. You go burnt amber and crimson, and what else is in there? There's a little bit of green and skin tones and so forth. And you just keep going around. You can barely see the layers of paint go on. It's so imperceptible, but they eventually start to build up, and they look like a skin tone. So like, this is the problem when you paint a corpse in a coffin, when there's an open casket. And I've talked to morticians who do this. It's a hell of a thing to make color look like it's coming from underneath instead of on top. Because really, all of this is blood vessels and pigmentation and things coming from underneath. So to do it, you have to use layering. And it's really interesting to do. Sorry, that was a tangent.
No, not at all. That's really interesting. Yeah, no, do all the tangents you want. That was great. I did forget. I was something else I wanted to touch on that you're talking about. Oh, I thought it was interesting that you said at such a young age that you empathized with the monsters. It wasn't just the visual aspect of the design, but that you actually felt for them, because that is a good monster story, is the tragedy of it.
Yes. That's exactly right. The misfits of the world always appealed to me. I used to have fantasies when I was a kid that somebody was in trouble, usually somebody who was physically different or mentally different, or in some way not able, small, or not able to take up for themselves. And I would be the one who would come out of the crowd. And in my little boy mind, I used to imagine myself, I guess, in this piping little boy voice, say, "Damn it, leave them alone." And I would puff up my chest, and the crowd would disperse. It was a fantasy I had. And I thought, that's what a monster should do. You should speak up for all the misfits of the world and say, you people think you're normal, you're not. I had a lot of latent anger as a child, Adam.
I guess so. I guess channeling it into acting is better than something else.
We didn't have something else when I was a kid, and I thank God that we didn't. In school I was picked on, so the options then were disappear, become a juvenile delinquent and get sent to reform school, or learn to entertain people. That was it. If you couldn't play sports, those are the only ways to be cool, is to be a juvenile delinquent, or to entertain people, or to play sports, because they wouldn't let you disappear. They find you. So I started entertaining. But yeah, my God, if the option for violence had existed, I probably would have taken it. So I'm glad I didn't grow up now.
Yeah, now is definitely a tricky time for people growing up. There's just too much access to things, and we were kind of talking about that right before we started. It would be nice to just disappear to a cabin sometimes and not be connected.
I think about that often. That's why I like, as much as I can, to be in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like sharp angles and hard plastic surfaces. I like things that are organic, and like a piece of bark on that tree back there, you can feel it, and it has texture. You can touch it, and it gives a little bit.
Yeah.
You feel the ground underneath my feet, bare feet if at all possible, and you can feel the ground giving and moving. I don't know how to describe it, but there's something about being in the woods, or just in a plot of dirt and nature where something's growing. I think it feeds humans, and when we don't have it, we just get mean and crazy.
You're 100% right. I think it's probably an evolutionary thing, or something back primal in our brains. But even like, look at New York City. It's the most city, industrious city, but they got Central Park running right through the middle of it. And without that, I think people would go even crazier.
And in LA, we have Griffith Park.
Okay, yeah.
Really close to my apartment in Hollywood, so I can walk down there and walk up the mountains and get lost. And there's a lot of people up in Griffith Park. doing that. Now down in Runyon Canyon Park, there are people walking in full face makeup on, in designer clothes because they want to be seen and discovered. But in Griffith Park, you get people like the little old man who can barely, and I'm not talking about myself, he can barely walk. Like there's a little old man and he's got ski poles to get up the mountain. And you, no matter how early you are there, he's making it. And he's just like one step, one step, one step. And I'm like, by God, if he can do it, I can do it.
Yeah, for sure. That's also interesting that you mentioned Runyon Canyon because I'm in upstate New York, so I've only been to LA one time, but I'm familiar with Runyon Canyon because it is the place to go and get photographed or whatever.
I hate it.
But Griffith Park, I'll have to check out next time I go.
Yeah, you just get lost in Griffith Park. There's all kinds of mountain trails and stuff. It's great.
Yeah, nice. Is that where you're at right now? Is Los Angeles?
No, yeah, I'm at my home. I'm not. I always thought you were going to say Griffith Park. Yeah.
No. I figured you were home. It just all the greenery behind you.
Yeah.
Nice. So you started entertaining in school. Was it official, like a drama club thing, or were you just kind of like, oh, I'll be the funny guy?
I started doing, and here comes a plane, and here comes the sanitation workers. They'll be going in a minute, both of them.
All right.
Sorry.
No, that's all right.
Listeners, I said, Adam, I'm going to try this outdoors, but there's always a plane, like when you're filming. Okay, there it goes. Yes, I started doing imitations of my teachers and principals so they wouldn't make fun of me and push me up against the lockers. And I learned that I could change my voice and my mannerisms and mimic people, and it would make them laugh. And so instead of hitting me, they would grab me, shove me up against the locker, and demand that I do this impression they liked. Essentially, I was their little performing slave monkey.
Right.
But it was okay because they left me alone. And then, the usual drama kid story. Once I got into a school play and there was applause, it was like, I'm not weird anymore for this few moments. It was addictive.
Nice. Okay. With the impressions you were doing, did that ever backfire? Did you ever do an impression of the wrong person or take it too far and it stopped being a joke?
They were teachers and principals only. So, no, it's completely safe because, every kid talks about how weird or funny their teacher talks. Or
Yeah.
Our principal was, in those days you had announcement systems. They had a big microphone and boxes with speakers on them. And so our principal, who was probably 100 years old then, he would blow on the microphone every morning. He'd go, attention students, is this on? Attention students. So that was my first little impression.
Nice. Okay. That's awesome. That's sorry, you hate that word. That's a great place to start though with the impressions is, punching up so that the other kids would laugh.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was the first play you got into?
It was one of those plays that was written just for school kids. I think it was called A Headin' for a Wedding. It was a hillbilly comedy, and I played the villain, of course. And in the middle of it, I started improvising, which I really should not have done. I don't think it's helpful to the play, but I learned that I could make people laugh and cheer, and I just couldn't stop. So I didn't help the play much, but I helped my self-confidence then because I thought, aha, there's something that I'm good at beside monster makeup, which I was pretty damn good at as a kid. I love doing monster makeup. So monster makeup and acting was all that I could do. And those aren't skills that would be helpful in the apocalypse.
Right, yeah. Did the monster makeup, does that come a lot of Fangoria? Because I think Fangoria used to even do tutorials, didn't they?
Dick Smith, at the time, God rest him, Dick Smith had a makeup course, and you could right away, you had to send away everything then, a self-addressed stamped envelope. You could pay to take the course, or you could buy what I got, which is the Dick Smith Movie Monster Makeup Handbook. And he told you how to do a mummy and how to do a Quasimodo and how to do a Frankenstein, which is very simple materials, Karo syrup, paper towels, grease paint. Man, I did every makeup in that book. And then I got into Lon Chaney, and I found pictures of Lon Chaney's makeup kit. And I found a listing of things that were in Lon Chaney's makeup kit. So my 14-year-old self was intent. I had to have everything that was in Lon Chaney's makeup kit. And so he had a material which was called mortician's wax. It had another name in his day, but it's used for reconstructing dead bodies when parts are missing or have fallen off or, whatever. So I was like, how am I going to get mortician's wax? So I went to the library, looked it up. I found a mortician supply catalog. Pierce Bond Chemicals in Texas is the only place that made mortician's wax. How? They only sell to morticians. What the hell am I going to do? So I got their phone number, called up, deepened my voice as much as I could, pretended to be the son of a mortician, made up the name of a mortuary with our home address, Route 2, Box 150. And they, sure enough, they sent me a catalog. And not only did it have mortician's wax, but Adam, it had like the embalming fluids of different colors. And I mean, for a weird kid, I was in heaven. I was like, this is really cool stuff. So that's why I got my mortician's wax. And then I could do anything because I could mold my face into any shape. It was really good.
That's so cool. It's one of those things that you just can't do now, is to get away with something like that. Because if if a 14-year-old tries calling now, they're just going to Google the address and be like, kid, is that your house? Like, you can't do it.
I have my old record player from back then, and I found stuck inside an album cover a letter in response to a letter I've written. I wrote to Capitol Records. I just wrote to like the address that was on the back of the albums and said, I was looking for this album of Winston Churchill speeches. And somebody wrote me back. And, I was just like a kid. And somebody from Capitol Records in Hollywood writes me back and says, Dear Mr. Oberst, we do not have the record you're looking for. So, yeah, it was a different world back then.
Yeah, the fact that you got a reply at all. I mean, they didn't have it, which is unfortunate, but the fact that they took the time.
Because they didn't know I was 14.
Yeah, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
You're a customer looking for a product.
That's right. I wrote to Michael Westmore in Hollywood and told him I wanted to be a Hollywood makeup artist and, how much I really liked his makeups. And he sent me back an autographed picture.
Oh, that's very cool. Okay.
And said, Billy, don't give up on your dream. I still have it. So he took the time to respond.
Yeah.
Different world.
For sure. Yeah. The makeup thing, you mentioned you still like doing it now, even whenever you get a chance. How far did you take it? Like how elaborate?
Oh, as elaborate as I can. I mean, HD ruined some of that for us because the higher definition you get, the less you're able to get away with prosthetic edges and paint and the things that we used to be able to sell under the right lighting. It's hard. You can do it on stage, but it's harder to do it on film. But I still do it for myself, just for fun. Absolutely.
All right. I can see that definitely about the HD thing. But I also feel like in the last, probably more than 5 years now, but fairly recently, there's been kind of a return to the practical effects rather than all the computer generated stuff, even if at the time it doesn't look as real, because it is real.
That's right. And horror fans will forgive you for that.
Mm-hmm.
If they know you have tried to pull off a practical effect and you've done a pretty good job, yeah, they'll look around the rough edges. That's why I love being associated with the horror genre, because it's a loving community. Unless you're trying to rip them off by taking advantage of them and your heart's not in the right place, then they'll rip you a new one, and they should.
Yeah, definitely. They definitely should. I always found that interesting about horror, but even the effects thing, I feel like it extends beyond horror. One of the biggest budget examples I can think of is if you watch the Lord of the Rings movies, that's rubber on guys to look like the orcs. Then you watch the Hobbit movies, which are made like 10 years later, you'd think they look better, and it's all animated villains, and it looks like you're watching half a cartoon, like it takes you out of it completely.
I personally agree. There's something in the human soul. There you get into the argument of, and I know guys who do CGI and they're really good, but it's just I'm always for the tactile. I'm always for the flesh. I'm really into body horror. And I don't think there's any substitute for the human body, face, soul. Mm-hmm. Even if the art is less perfect.
Yeah. It's that uncanny valley, because when it's CG, even really well done CG, like the best of the best, you still know it's not real, and your mind's not fully convinced.
Agree. And sometimes less is more with an effect. You
Hmm.
know, sometimes gouge out of an eye can be done really simply if the actor can sell it, and you can get a lot more horror out of the clutching of the eye with the blood pouring out and the holding something in your hand without letting them actually see it.
Yeah, the less is more, I think, for me anyway, is a rule of horror. As soon as you go too far, it just becomes camp, or it's not quite there.
You know, you're talking about creative journey, and I brought something down with me today because I've listened to some of your podcasts, and I figured you might ask about these kind of things. And I just want to mention this before you move on to whatever you move on to. Okay, so this is a piece of Ray Bradbury's house. Bradbury's house in LA when he died in 2012 was torn down. This is a piece of stucco from the outside of his basement office. A friend of his gave it to me because I play Ray in a solo performance as him for his family, and also I do a stage reading of a piece that he wrote called Pillar of Fire about a corpse. Anyway, so somebody was kind enough to give me one of these few pieces of the house that was saved. And so I keep this always nearby and touch it because I love me some Ray Bradbury. And he created ideas that will live well beyond me. They certainly live beyond him. But he did it not by magic. When I was a kid, I read his books and I thought they were magic. But it wasn't magic. It was a guy going to work. It was this. Somebody inside this wall sat their ass down in front of a typewriter and said, I don't know if this idea is going to work, but I'm going to try it. Tried some things, ripped it out of the typewriter, threw it away, went and got a sandwich and said, shit, I'm going to try again. That's how magic gets made. Magic is not magic. And that's kind of a driving creative principle for me. I'm a workaday, working Joe actor, and I just keep driving away at it. And it happens because you go to work.
I love that. Yeah, that's a really good sentiment, and it's cool that you have the tangible thing, especially when we were just talking about a practical versus, you could have all of Ray Bradbury's stuff on your Kindle. It's not the same as smelling the book, holding the book, and even more so, you have a piece of his office where he created it. That's really cool.
I have his books, his paperbacks, and I wouldn't trade them for Kindle versions for anything because I've lived in them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot more of a connection when you can hold it and feel the weight of it, and also, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
I was going to say also, I appreciate you listening to some of the show.
Oh, absolutely. I always want to know who I'm talking to. With regard to books, like I have read that the human mind, we like maps. We're spatial, so we want to know where am I in this book. I can remember that what I want to look for was on the left-hand side of the page somewhere, or oh, there it is. But if I'm on the Kindle, I have no damn idea where I am. I can't find anything and I can't reference anything. But with this, I can remember, okay, it was near the back of the book, and something about the human mind likes maps.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's a very interesting thing you bring up because like a few years ago we moved and I had a ton of books that I had read. I'm like, I'm probably not going to read them again. Let me give them all to used bookstore, Goodwill, wherever they went. And now that we're here in the house and established, I'm not worried about filling a truck. It's like I wish I had that book just to reference it, like you were just saying, or just to maybe reread this part. And I have the option to buy it for $3 on Kindle and reread it, but it's just not the same experience.
It's really weird how that is. I have the same. I have books that I'm never going to reread the whole thing, but there are parts of them that I really like, and sometimes I just want to read a passage.
Yeah, and even just to see it there on a shelf, then it triggers the memory of what you experienced with the story. Or
now you bring up something that Bradbury was a big believer in. He said, "Surround yourself with your loves. Your environment you should be surrounded by things you love." So in his office, he had all kinds of shit. He had masks from all over the world. He had carnival posters. He had dinosaurs stuffed and books, and he had everything that he loved around him. So I've tried to make my home office the same way. It's messy, and nobody would like to see it except me. But I can look around, and in every corner, I can see something I love, and it helps to create.
That's great because I do the exact same thing with my home office. I mean, I'm facing a pretty simple wall right now, but the whole out there is all tchotchke kind of stuff that, me and my wife doesn't tell me not to put it in the living room, but it would just bring clutter to the house. So I just pack this one room.
Yes, it's your love cave.
Yes, exactly. So when I want to, do an interview with another creative person, I can look around at it. When I'm in here, I do a comic book with a friend, so I'm in here working on that, and I'm just surrounded by inspiration.
Me too.
Do you also write?
I try, but I'm better at the essay form than long form. If I try to write a script, it's a short. If I try to write a book, it's an essay. I'm very succinct, although I'm verbose right now. But when I write, I always want to Gettysburg Address it. Lincoln said, "If it's a paragraph, can I say it in a sentence? If it's a sentence, can I say it in a word?" And even on set, I'm a big proponent for cutting dialogue, and I try always to get my dialogue almost eliminated. I don't want to say much at all. If they'll let me, I say, maybe this can be said with just a look, maybe a word, but a look would be better. So yeah, minimalist.
That's really interesting for someone who's done as much screen time as you have, and you did stage prior to that. Are you still doing stage now?
Once now, I think COVID is
well, yeah.
other side. I'm trying to start booking my Ray Bradbury performances. In fact, I heard from the World Science Fiction Convention, DisCon 3. They're going to have it this year, and it will be in December in Washington. And they asked me if I would be willing to do one of my Bradbury performances there. And I'm really excited because that would be like a return to stage for me.
Yeah.
See how long that answer was? The correct answer was yes, I still do.
But if I just said, "Hey, are you still doing stage?" and you said, "Yeah," and sat back, I'd be like, he does not want to do this interview. I should wrap this up.
You're right. And I do want to do this interview because I'm a hermit. And outside of my family, I don't interact with people because I'm afraid of people, and I always have been. And so this is my interaction. Being on set is my socialization.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I could see. And I don't get that feeling from you otherwise. Well, I was asking something before the stage question. Oh, with all your screen time and your stage time and being an actor, it was kind of surprising to hear that when you write, you're like, oh, I'd rather just write down my thought in the most direct way possible and be done with it. But I guess you have the other outlets, so maybe that's why.
Well, yes, and even on stage and on screen, I have become overly familiar with exposition, and I hate it.
Mm-hmm.
I hate it. I like to be put down in a story and have to deduce where I am from the setting and the dialogue and the relationship between the characters. I like to intuit where I am and not be told, here we are in Hawaii, honey, and it's 2005. Remember when we came here in 1995? Oh, Adam, I hate that. But some people make you do it because they say the audience has to know everything. I'm on the opposite end. I think the audience has to know almost nothing. Take them into your world. It's your world. They will discover where they are. They'll wake up like newborn babies and they'll figure out how to breathe. They'll figure it out. As an audience member, that's what I like. So that's always my preference.
No, I'm right there with you, especially in a movie or even a play. It's a visual medium. Why say, oh, hey, this is great. We're in Hawaii. Why not just have them looking out at Hawaii?
Right. And maybe not even say it's Hawaii, because then you've limited it with people, unless Hawaii is integral to the story. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Less is more. So I did this art house movie called DIS, DIS. Unearthed Films released it. It's brutal. It's extreme. It's offensive. I love it because it's the director's personal vision of hell. We shot it in Mexico. It's seeped in the mythology of the Mandrake. Very weird, strange film. But it's almost silent. And for that reason, the people who hate it really hate it. And the people who love it really love it. I've read nothing in between. It's either people who say, this is very disturbing and I've been thinking about it for a week and I love thinking about it, or it's people who said, this doesn't make any sense at all, because they weren't told what it was.
Yeah.
It's two distinct type of audiences. And I fear that we have created several generations now of the latter who need everything explained or they won't accept it.
You got to be spoon fed in 4 minutes or less.
Look at movie trailers.
There's a lot of times where I try to avoid them because if it's a movie, if I hear about it, oh, hey, so-and-so's in this new movie. Okay, I want to see that. Then you see the trailer. Oh, now I've seen it.
You sure have.
There's no surprises left. So,
and indies can get away with doing a trailer that's short and evocative and just sort of whets your appetite.
Which is exactly what a trailer should do. It should just be information. Hey, this movie's coming. Here's a taste. Coming soon.
That's exactly right.
So speaking of your style of acting, and you have done a lot. I mean, I jumped on your IMDb pages because I try to get a little bit familiar beyond, like Painkiller as an example. And you've done a lot. So we can't really run through the whole thing unless you want to be here for the next month. But I guess we can kind of go in chunks. So when you were first starting, did you move to LA to start? Maybe you started more locally? If you just want to kind of.
I did theater on the East Coast for 14 years, and I was really happy as a touring theater actor. That was my life. I was very happy doing it. And then by accident, strange accident, I ended up applying for the very first thing I ever did on television, which is the role of William Sherman in a docudrama called Sherman's March. And amazingly, I got it. And I knew nothing. I didn't even know. When a scene is completed and the director's happy, the director says, moving on. And the director kept saying, moving on. And I thought it was just a personal weird thing that I knew nothing. I didn't even know not to look at the camera. So that was 2006, 7, I think 7. And that's when I started. And then after that, that's when people kept saying, oh, you should look into LA. And so I did.
Okay. So it was just 14 years ago or so that you moved to LA?
Yeah. That was the second stage of my career. So the first stage was theater, nothing but theater. And the second stage, I thought it was going to be theater and film and TV, but it quickly became nothing but film and TV. And now I've tried to put a little theater back in.
Was the theater on the East Coast, was it New York City based, or were you just kind of all over? Because you mentioned traveling.
Based in New York City and up and down the coast, like all around, some over as far as the Mississippi. I was on the school circuit for years playing historical characters. Back then, there was program money available through National Endowment for the Arts for arts residencies. So the schools would get this money to have a artist come in for the week, and that would be me. And I would teach about whatever historical character I was playing, and then we would culminate it with a performance and a Q&A to try to get them to understand that history can be expressed not just in dates, but in the wider scope of human existence is also a part of history, to get them to really understand the nature of the person I was playing and then perform it. So
were you a fan of history prior to that? Like, is that what like you saw the gig and I love history, I want to do this, or was it an acting gig and then you had to learn about the history after?
No one would hire me. I couldn't get hired. I couldn't get arrested in a play. I couldn't get arrested. And so I decided, you know what? I'm just going to hire myself. And so I created these one-man shows and started my own business. And then I got an agent interested, and we started booking and going around to conferences and became pretty busy, and then started doing Dickens' Christmas Carol as a one-man. So my specialty was one-man shows, doing people in their own words, very, very word-based. I was very into redacting loads of material into just the essence of what that person stood for. That's what I really get off on. I like revision. I like editing, redaction, and compacting ideas.
What kind of historical figures would you do? Was it just like you didn't perform as Charles Dickens, you performed his play as a one-man show, you said?
Yeah, in period costume. No, not specifically as Dickens, but playing all the characters. And that was
okay.
Because you have to decide what parts am I going to leave in, what parts am I going to leave out, and then how to join them together. I played Twain for years. I played John F. Kennedy. I played a Southern writer named Louis Grizzard. Now I'm doing Bradbury. So I love larger than life figures in their own words.
That's interesting, and it's not ones that maybe schools would hit on all the time, so you can kind of expand their knowledge base.
Oh yeah, well, and they'd have me year after year. I do one character 1 year. I do Kennedy 1 year. I do Twain 1 year. It was very interesting. I really liked being in the classroom. I liked interacting with the kids and telling them that I also found history boring until I really started to read the real history, which is much more interesting than anything they told you in school back then.
Mm-hmm. I went down that same path where I always thought history was really boring, and then you kind of fall into the right stories and the right medium, and it's much, much better.
Yeah, I played Lincoln in Lincoln versus Zombies, and Lincoln was one of the characters that I briefly played on stage. Other kids laughed at me because I was too short, so I quit. But in researching Lincoln, I found that he was we would call him an abused husband. She gave him hell. I mean, she not only verbally abused him, but in one case, she hit him on the shoulder really hard with a piece of wood right in front of people who were visiting the White House because he hadn't put wood in the fire. He was prone to just going off into his own mind, and he didn't respond quickly enough, and she whopped him. She said, "Mr. Lincoln, you pretended not to hear me, but you will hear me now." Wham! Like, damn. So Lincoln's attitude toward his marriage was, we have it in our power to be miserable or happy in our circumstances, and I choose to be happy. And so when the South said, essentially, we want a divorce, Lincoln said, no, divorce was anathema to him. You find a way to be happy in your union. So I thought that was instructive, and it's something kids should know.
That's great. And it really humanizes him because, of course, everyone knows Lincoln, and he's this, larger than life, impossibly good figure, but he was a man. So that's really cool to humanize somebody like that. And it doesn't diminish his accomplishments in any way. It just makes him more interesting.
And the same with Kennedy when I played him. Kennedy, we know the ways in which he was far from a perfect man, but Kennedy was seized with self-doubts, just like the rest of us. His relationship with his father was not the best. And so all of those things helped to humanize him. And back then, this is the 90s, it was still possible for children to think of the presidency as an office to be respected. Mm-hmm. And of a president, just a generic, when you said president of the United States, you didn't think of a clown show. You thought of, something slightly removed, slightly above, slightly dignified. That show would never work today because we're way beyond that.
Yeah, there's no more prestige to the office. Yeah.
There's no prestige to anything. We won't allow it anymore. We have torn down everything and trampled it underfoot, and we're bored.
That's for sure. Boredom is the key to all of it, I think. If people were more challenged in healthy ways, there'd be a lot less of the ridiculousness.
We're children who tear things up and then sit among the toys we've destroyed and say, what now?
Yeah. That's 100% it. Without going too deep down that road, that's 100% it. And it's a shame because how do you turn that around?
And I don't mean in that, I'm not talking about politics specifically. I'm talking about online culture.
Yeah. I was talking about everything. Yeah.
Yeah. The destructiveness,
social media.
Recently, a site did a review of Painkiller. And I commented, as I always do, thanks for reviewing the film. It's an honor to be mentioned on whatever the site was. To me, that's just a professional courtesy. Yeah. And I always do it. But in this case, some people have a beef with the site owner, and they started leaving a string of abusive comments toward me, which is fine, and towards the reviewer and towards the person and anybody who reads the site. And it's just, I never commented again. I never added to the chain. But it was such an outburst of negativity. I was astounded, really, that people would care that much to put that much energy into being negative. It just blew my mind. But they were obviously having fun destroying.
But I think it's not a real having fun. Like, it's easy for them, it's accessible, so they do it. But if they had something more meaningful going on, if they were fully invested in something, especially something creative, they wouldn't be spending their time doing that.
Push-ups help.
Yeah, anything. Go run around the block a couple times and burn some of that off. It's just, take up a hobby, get a harder job, whatever it is. But I think it's just this whole do as little as possible and just be addicted to the internet. And it's really tough to try to turn that around.
When you say those words, I feel slime descending on me.
Addicted to the internet?
Yeah, being addicted to the internet, it feels nasty to me and wet and slimy, and I can't wait to just like jump in the river and wash it off.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. It might seem weird because I do an online show, but I mean, yeah, I watched your movie streaming over the internet, legally, don't worry. But it's just to live on there and just live in the negativity. It's a trap because I was on all the social medias, I had a personal accounts and I'd talk to my family, talk to my friends, but then you just start scrolling and you get lost in it and you're kind of wasting time, which isn't the end of the world, but then it turns to negativity. And it's just like, they even call it doom scrolling now. I don't know if you've seen that term, but it's just like you're addicted to the bad news. And then they found out on these algorithms, hey, people interact more with things they don't like than things they like. So if they interact one time with something they don't like, give them more of that.
Right. Yes, because, and we're probably just going to run out of time here, but these are interesting ideas. There are media funnels. This is a typewritten medium. This is from the typographical age. So anything you pour into this format is going to come out in a certain structure, and it's going to be language-based and it's going to be reason-based, because it's really hard to put nonsense into this format. If you pour anything through the television funnel for the television age, it comes out as entertainment, whether it's religion or news or whatever it is, because it's a visual medium, it's going to be entertaining. So that funnel always changes it. And I've been wondering for years now, what is the internet funnel? When we pour stuff down that funnel and it comes out on the internet, how to describe the way it comes out. And I don't have an exact descriptor for it, but I know it comes out different.
Yeah. It's all skewed. I think a lot of it is because all the intent is taken out.
That's interesting.
It's just black words on, white background. Someone could be very complimentary in an email, but if it's a short email or they put a word in caps they shouldn't have, or you're having a bad day, and I don't mean, target you, but just a person, you can interpret it all wrong, and all intent, all meaning is just lost. Or you could just take a screenshot of half of what someone said, and then that's what they said now. Like, it's so permanent but impermanent that it's scary.
Really interesting.
Yeah, I probably spend too much time thinking about the ills of social media. But I shut it all down. I don't really do the social media thing. It's just, and for like a week, I'd be like, oh, I could go back on and just talk to these people that I actually know in real life. But it's like, why? Just call them.
You call people?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I text also, but yeah, I'll call people. Especially if I haven't talked to them in a while, I'll call them and catch up for 20 minutes and you actually get a real conversation. Especially with how everything feels so divisive now. But if you actually sit down with somebody, you're not going to be screaming at each other.
No, you can't. Even if it's somebody you really, really disagree with, if you're listening to them, like actively listening, that diminishes acrimony quicker than anything. It's just to listen. People want to be listened to. That's great.
Yeah, it's like the example you gave with a site reviewed your movie. So you went on and said, hey, thanks for checking it out. Whether you liked it or not, thanks for checking it out. I appreciate you covering it. If that was at, say, a Comic-Con, where whatever outlet was doing a panel and they said, oh, and I also watched Painkiller, and they say whatever they have to say about it, and you happen to be walking by and you just popped your head in, hey, cool, thanks for mentioning it. I appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time. that whole room wouldn't turn around and start saying heinous things to you. Even if they didn't like it, they would just not say anything.
That would be the end of it, right?
Yeah, and it would be right then and there, and that would be that. And the people who are into it could take it home, and the people who weren't would flush it out. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's just strange. Sorry, I kind of took your tangent further.
No, I'm very tangential, and so it's hard to get me back on track.
That's all right. I don't want to hold you up all day, though, so we probably should talk about Painkiller. Okay. I found out after I watched it that it was kind of a sequel, which I thought was really cool, and I will definitely go back and watch Stress to Kill, was it, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's where that character first appeared.
Yeah, I love that character, and I really liked Painkiller because it was the cool revenge movie for full entertainment's sake, but also dealt with such a real thing without ever like sitting someone down to preach to them. Like, I think you kind of nailed it across the board.
I'm glad you liked it.
Definitely did. So I guess the question of how did that come across your desk isn't exactly there because it's a sequel. So how did that character first come about?
Well, Mark Savage asked me to do both movies, and Mark Savage is one of my directorial gods. Mark's from Australia, and in Australia, he did very, very culty exploitation type films. He's very into obscure Japanese revenge films and this whole subgenre, which he turned me on to, and I love. So some of his stuff was banned in Australia, and that makes it close to my heart.
Yeah.
And so I met him in America and Dark Delicacies bookshop in Burbank, and he asked me to do Stress to Kill. That was the first movie we did together, about a character who is so stressed out that he has a heart attack, and his doctor says, you've got to remove sources of stress in your life. And the things that stress him out are people who are annoying. So he starts killing them. And his blood pressure gets really good. And that was Stress to Kill. And Armand Asante was a cop out to get me. So then when this came back, he said, well, it's sort of a sequel, but we want to structure it so people don't have to have seen the first film. And it's about opioids. And I was like, oh, okay, all right. And then he hit me with the real crusher. He said, you know, Tom, who I know from the first film, the executive producer and co-starred, he said, Tom's son died of an accidental opioid overdose. And so that's the basis for this film. All that pain is poured into this film. And then I was like, oh, God, you know, I don't know if I can handle this. This is going to be really, really important to Tom and to millions of people who have lost people to opioids. So I don't know if I can do this because they need, you know, they don't need my usual Bill Oberst Jr. stuff. They want something that is powerful, realistic, a little scary. So yeah, I didn't know if I could really do the role and told Mark so, but they hired me to do it. And I hope that it was an acceptable job. I wanted to do a good job for Tom and for Mark because they're both friends and I respect them. And I knew that the source of it was Tom's real pain from losing his son.
Yeah, it's a really sad story, and unfortunately, it's a fairly common story lately. But I think the way that the movie tackles it is really interesting because if you don't want to get into the real world aspect of it or, you know, feel anything real, you could just watch a cool revenge movie. But if you're at least somewhat aware of how bad the opioid crisis is, you should be pissed off.
And I didn't ask for one single dialogue cut in this. There's a lot of exposition in here about the opioid crisis and how many people have died. And the reason that I did not was because this movie, to me, the script plays as sitting with a person who's grieving.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, sometimes they say the same thing over and over again, but you listen to them, you listen. So the whole script is like a cry of pain from someone who's saying, I'm really hurting and what's happened is terribly unfair and it's morally wrong. That's what the script feels like. That's what my character feels like. Because what he's doing is, it's not helping Adam. You know, he's not going to help in the opioid epidemic by killing the people that he kills. He just wants to be heard. God, that sounds horrible, doesn't it?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but it's taken to an extreme.
Yeah.
And the exposition, I never felt like it felt like exposition because a lot of it was delivered through a podcast, which is a medium where you get information across.
Yes.
So that was a really good way to kind of interject the real world throughout the revenge story.
And that dialogue is really hard for me because I'm known as Pawsy Bill. I can't tell you how I like silences, and I can't tell you how many times in rehearsal with an actor that I haven't worked with before, I get half of my line out, do this, and they're popping off their line, and I'm not finished yet. And so in this one, I could not. And Mark said, you've got to just roll it out there. You've got to roll it out. Pop, 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 pop. And it's really hard for me. And so it was a discipline to get that dialogue just popping, 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 and not take any pauses.
So not only was it more dialogue in a chunk than you typically like doing, but it was faster than you're used to doing it or than you like doing it.
Yeah, so it wasn't fun. All work is not fun, but it was rewarding to do it and finally get into a rhythm of doing it where I could see Mark and Tom nodding their heads and pleasing them.
And you had the contrast too, because when your character was, out in the field handling things, he was not giving long speeches to all the people he guns down.
Which is good.
Yeah.
if somebody kills me, I really don't want them to go into a long spiel beforehand.
Yeah, it's just get it over with. Like we know where this is going.
Don't.
I liked the line where somebody says, "Why do you shoot him 6 times?" and you say, "That's how many bullets the gun holds." I thought that was so cool.
It makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, just to bring it to a slightly lighter place, but yeah, that was a really good line.
To me, and I'm overanalyzing it, but the fact that he used a 6-gun to me connected him with the idea of the American outlaw hero from the Old West.
Yeah, it kind of had that vibe. Plus, you could take it to like law enforcement with like Clint Eastwood and Dirty Harry, where he was on the other side of the law, but it was still he's a badass, undeniable.
Yeah.
Plus, there's just something.
The trick of getting people to root for someone who's doing something that's morally reprehensible.
Yes, that for sure. Yeah. Did you have maybe it would have been more relevant for Stress to Kill than this one because you are playing the same character, but was that something that you, I don't know if struggled with is the right word, but you really had to find the line between like, okay, he's murdering people and we're playing it up for story, not quite for laughs, but something a little lighter. Was that hard to find that character?
Yes, because in Stress to Kill, there were comedic moments and it was outlandish. Someone would talk really loud in a theater on their cell phone, and my character would repeatedly ask them to be quiet, and they wouldn't, so he just killed them. And everyone can relate, and this. But yeah, this was heavier, and so I had to find that. I feel so pretentious as an actor saying I had to find the blah blah blah. These are people who really work for a living. Go, oh please, all you do is but you do have to find. You have to find things. You have to find the emotional world to live in, and then try to be consistent. I brushed my hair before I came because I just wanted to feel like I was grieving and stripped down and emotionally bare. So I just went like, that was the start because I always approach things from the physical.
Okay, so a little bit more, would that be method acting?
Oh, very method, yeah. I have to be nice on set because I'm not famous. If I was an A-lister, I could be an asshole. But I stay in my own world. And if somebody wants to talk, the very basics to be polite, but I don't want to have chat. I try to be as method as I can because I'm not that great an actor, Adam, and it's not easy for me to get into character and stay there. So it takes more work for me. I can't just flip it on and off.
Okay. I disagree when you said you're not a great actor because I know I had seen you in things before, and then I did an interview with the woman who made The Parish because I also saw that just this year, and then Painkiller. And then I started looking more into it, and like Stress to Kill is high on my list of things to watch next. And looking through your IMDb, it's like you've done everything.
Well, I work a lot, and I work a lot I guess because I have a certain look, and also because I'm not a bitch. You can get a lot of work in this business by not being a bitch.
I think you have a really commanding presence with a doing less to get more result too.
I try to do less. Now, Robert De Niro said, people ask me all the time what I should do on camera, and I tell them nothing, absolutely nothing. And he's right. All you have to do is just think about the emotion or the words, and your eyes will do everything. And then your eyes will tell your body what to do. But if you start from saying, I'm angry, you're dead.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. And yeah, every great performance you can think of, that's what it is.
So because of it, you're always going to, because I deal in malevolence and darkness, I have my own private dark wells, which I must never share with anybody, or they wouldn't be any good anymore. They wouldn't work. But you have to continually go to them and go to them in new ways to ravage your soul and to twist you up inside again so that you can show that in your eyes. There's an emotional price to that. Again, I know that people who work for a living will say, oh, that's not an emotional cost, but it is.
Yeah. It's a different emotional cost. And a lot of people kind of downplay the arts, but I think if anything, this last year has proven that we need them. Maybe
so.
Not a lot, but people who do.
People need to be entertained. People need to be. There's sort of a poetic sense of the world that film and television and writing and poetry, of course, and all the arts at their best can make people think about the world in a non-literal way. And that's really important to me. Like the metaphor is always more important than the exact meaning of anything. And that's what films are. They're analogies and metaphors, the good ones. So this film to me it's a film about grief. It's a film about loss. And we're meeting this man at a particular stage of grief, which everybody who's lost somebody goes through. He'll be at another stage later on, inevitably, but this is where he is. And you're sitting with him, and there's the body right there in the coffin, and you're sitting with him, and you don't know what the hell to say. That's what the movie felt like to me.
Yeah, and that stage of grief, I think, is the one that's maybe most important to have something like this, where I'm not recommending anyone who's going through something like this picks up a gun and goes out there. Obviously, I would never condone that, but that's the scary part about that grief is you want something physical to blame or to hit, or you just want to let that aggression out because you feel so helpless. So a movie like this is.
That's why it was better, I think, when we used to take care of the body of our deceased loved one ourselves, because you physically touched them and you could provide them, not with comfort because they're dead, but you washed the body, you laid it out, you picked out the clothes, you did the hair, you took care of them in that way. And I think that allows you to work out some of the anger, the grief that you have by touching. Touching is always important. Whereas now I die and I'm taken away and the screen is blank. And it makes you even angrier if you love me.
Yeah, I can definitely see what you're saying. The act of doing something is part of the healing process.
I think so.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I never really considered that. That's really interesting. Yeah. Wow. That's really powerful.
This has been a good conversation.
Oh, absolutely. I really appreciate you taking the time. I didn't mean to hold you up for so long, but I just was having a great time with it.
No, and me too. Unexpected. See, life is better when it's organic and unexpected.
Absolutely. With the time thing, I guess if you want to tell everybody where they can see Painkiller, maybe find more of your work or find you online if you do that.
Sure. Painkiller is just the word Painkiller, one word, Painkiller. It's on all of the on-demand platforms. And you just Google Painkiller and you'll find it. It's on Amazon and I think most of the on-demand. Look up Mark Savage too. Look up some of his other work. He did a film called Purgatory Road about a traveling priest who's giving really deadly absolution from this weird van. It's very good. If you want to find me online, you can find me at Bill Oberst Jr. And I'm on all the social media. I'm even on TikTok.
Wow.
You know, yeah, the TikTok people don't really like, I don't get millions of views because I'm just like posting clips and stuff. But my manager said you need to be on TikTok. So yeah, I'm everywhere. I'm on Twitter. I'm Twitter more than any place else. I really like Twitter because people can't like or no, they can. They can do a heart. I
Yeah, they do a
forgot.
little heart. Yeah.
Yeah, but I like Twitter. So yeah, you can follow me there. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for taking the time. That was a great conversation, and I really enjoyed Painkiller, so people should definitely check it out.
Adam, I appreciate it. And keep creating, man. I hope you will maybe write a screenplay.
Oh, sure. Yeah, always working on something.
Awesome. Good to talk to you.
Thank you. Yeah, you too.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
I'd like to thank Bill one more time for coming on the show to talk to me about his career, about movie making, about the wide range of things we talked about. He was an absolutely fascinating guy to talk to. I really hope we get to do it again at some point. Make sure you check out his newest movie, Painkiller, available now. Awesome revenge story that kind of tackles the issues with the opiate crisis in our country, but it never gets too preachy. It stays a fun, entertaining movie, as we talked about. We have a lot more interviews, a lot more new movie coverage, a lot more great things coming your way, so make sure you like and subscribe. You're not going to want to miss out. Also, make sure you listen to So Wizard Podcast every single week wherever you get your podcasts. So Wizard Podcasts can also be found on Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you get multiple monthly bonus shows. SoWizardPodcast.com is your resource for reviews, recommendations, videos, merchandise, and more. We love hearing feedback. Drop something in the comments. Leave us something on social media. All of our accounts can be found after the show and in the show notes. And on a more personal note, a good friend and I released a comic book at the beginning of this year. It's called Social Studies. It's an ongoing series, kind of day in the life comedy comic about the high school experience, all the insanity and drama that goes with it, but we keep it light and fun. We write it like an animated sitcom. It's fast-paced, unique characters. Check it out, socialstudiescomic.com. Thanks.